All right, let's get started, John. So formal introduction here. My name is John Lytle. I am the application engineering manager, so I head up the application group. The application group generally interfaces with the customer, talking about applications, things like that. We do all the service and support, that type of thing. I've been with Promess for 20 years now. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's about right. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is John Krause. I'm a sales engineer at Promess. I've been here for about 6 years now. Today, we're located in our Brighton, Michigan campus, world headquarters of Promess Incorporated. So who is Promess, John?
Well, first, let's talk about what the title of the webinar
Oh,
actually
right.
is. So the webinar today we're going to talk about is how to be successful from prototype to production. We'll get into a little more what that really means, but Promess, to answer your question, Promess is a sensing company, sensing and motion. That's what we kind of specialize in. So all of our products generally have some level of sensing and motion control in our products,
Yeah,
correct?
so a good way to kind of think about this is if we go back about 100 years when Henry Ford first developed the assembly line, throughout the assembly line was several operations where arbor presses would be present. And at those stations, an operator would be there with his parts and his arbor press, and he'd take his part, he'd put it under the arbor press, and he'd pull down with his lever, and he could see visually if the part was pressed correctly. But most importantly, he could feel with his arm if it was pressed correctly. And if it wasn't, he would maybe readjust and repress, or maybe he would scrap it and get a new part. Now, as technology developed and technology advanced, hydraulic presses or pneumatic presses came about, but all the feel was lost. So then we fast forward to the early 1980s, and that's really where Promess gets involved. As Promess came out with the electromechanical assembly press with integrated sensing, and that's really who Promess is.
Yeah, so it gave that touch and feel back into the assembly process, and that's why I said we're basically a sensing and motion type company, that
Yeah,
type of
so
thing.
today we're going to talk about how to be successful from prototype to production, like John had said. So we're going to go through 5 steps and what it looks like typically when you work with Promess. Each of these steps are very critical as they decrease your risk to get that number as close to 0% as possible, because everybody's looking for as low risk of solution as possible.
Right, I was going to just say this process, from a Promess standpoint, is something we've kind of always done. It isn't really until recently we've kind of created a formality with it and kind of broke it down into these steps. But following this process, and we've called it other things too.
Sure.
We call it the proven process sometimes, or take you on that Promess journey, that type of thing. But this particular process, like John had mentioned, really is to reduce the risk, allow you to understand your process as well as you can utilizing, our products.
Yeah. So number one in that journey that we're going to be taking you down today is the initial discussion. So in the beginning, there will be some sort of phone call between you and I, or you and one of our other engineers, where we're going to have an initial dialogue.
Right. This is pretty straightforward, right? The initial discussion part. But what's important about this, and not necessarily, or more the unusual side of it, is that I want to stress that we're not a catalog product. So what that means is I'm not going to direct you to the website and say order this particular product because we think that might be the right solution for you. We're going to try to learn more about your process. We're going to try to learn more about your application by asking you questions, things like that. Questions like maybe how much force does it take to assemble your product, things like that. Additionally, what we try to find out at this initial discussion is if your particular application is the right fit for our product. Sometimes it's not.
Right. And sometimes we'll tell you that, and that's an okay thing. What we do want is the product that you eventually get is the perfect fit for you. And that's really what we're trying to get at. So kind of recapping number one, there's going to be some initial dialogue between you and Promess. Maybe a visit from us to your facility might happen, or we want to kind of see how you're doing it now, see the technology that you have at your facility now. And then we're going to have that initial discovery.
It could be also as much as a demo or something like that.
Right. Yep.
This may be also the point where from the sales side, the application group gets a little more involved, that type of thing. But that leads into our step number two, right? Step number 2 is our process development portion of this process. Said process twice there. So the process development side of this really consists of us we now understand your application. We think there might be a product that suits your particular application. Now we want to help you understand more about that application and explain our products and show you that our products actually work. So the process development of step 2 basically consists of utilizing our product development center, and getting parts from you if possible to run those tests and things like that.
Yeah, so at our facility, our campus here in Brighton, Michigan, we have a dedicated facility called the Process Development Center, or we also call it the PDC, with all of our systems set up that are solely there for you guys to come in and use to do testing, or also known as feasibility type studies, to determine, one, is the technology correct for you? 2, maybe we might want to know how much force it's going to take, because it's really expensive to get a press that's maybe too big for the operation, or maybe a system that's too small. That's really, really expensive.
And finding that out when it's already
Right.
in production or at the integrator, if it's being integrated at some level, becomes
Right.
super costly.
And then at the end of this study that we do, which generally take a half day or so, and we always encourage you to take part in that, come up with the parts, we give you a full report, data, curves, and everything for you to have available to you about your parts.
Yeah, so we kind of put this package together. This is something you take back with you, and then you can share with your group or your team. So it does a number of things for us at that point. It helps us figure out the precise product, the right size product for your application. Gives you a level of hands-on if you come visit with your parts. It helps give you a really good understanding of how that whole process is going to work. And you'll see later on in these steps where we utilize that information as we get up to the other steps of this.
Right, and during this process, we're writing your program, we're doing all this. So as we go and integrate this later on your floor at the machine builder, we already did half the work. And keep in mind, this process that we're talking about is of no cost. All it does is take your time. So kind of recapping number 2, Process Development Center, really it's one of the highlights of this entire journey that we'll take you down. I would encourage all of you guys to please take advantage of number 2.
Yeah, this is the heart and soul of this whole process. The more we can understand about your parts and application, the more we're able to reduce the risk for you and speed up the whole process and make sure that it's successful once it's concluded. Step 3, we call this part of it the build and deliver part. So the order's now been received. You decided that you're going to use a Promess product. So this side of it's a little bit different. We have a little different process here at Promess. We call it our agile manufacturing process. And what is that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to kind of take from that. The one thing is that everything's locally built here in Brighton, Michigan, or sourced here locally. And what that allows us to do is that allows for maybe if there's some sort of change in the order or something last minute, we can adapt to those things on the fly because we have that flexibility and that agile process.
For sure. Additionally, as we're creating your particular system for your application, obviously we build it up. We're using various levels of parts, things like that. But at the very end of the whole thing, you're getting a fairly complete system. And what I mean by that is that system's been run off. So it's actually been cycled. It runs a certain amount of parts. It gets calibrated. That calibration is done with certified equipment. So any sensing built into that system has been calibrated. And then you get all that documentation for it. And you kind of go through that whole product runoff portion of it. Additionally, I want to talk a little bit about lead times. We've gone through a pretty interesting last couple of years with COVID, supply chain issues, and things like that we deal with, that everybody's dealing with at this point. I want to emphasize that from a Promess standpoint, we've been pretty proactive in securing components and different parts for that make up our system. So from a lead time standpoint, being that we've been proactive and we have a very large inventory at this time of parts to to fill those orders, that our lead times have stayed the same and in some cases have even gotten better.
Improved, yeah. So right now we're running at about 12 and a half weeks on our standard systems, but don't let that be a hindrance on any of your orders. We are so blessed right now with our lead time that if you need something quick, we can probably do that as well.
Yeah, we can do things, especially 1s and 2s type orders, we can generally do really quick if
Yeah.
need be.
Yep.
Generally, John's going to ask you that as part of this whole process. You're going to say, hey, can I do better than the 12 and a half weeks? And John will come back and say, well, what do you need? And we'll go back and figure it out. Being that we do this agile manufacturing process, we're able to adapt and generally and get you that product quickly.
Yeah, so kind of recapping number 3, the entire build and deliver segment here, our agile manufacturing process that kind of allows us to be able to do all these things to meet the changing environment that we know that you guys are in. Moving on to number 4, setup and support.
Yep, so setup and support, important. Everybody talks about having great support, great setup, that type of thing. From a Promess standpoint, I work with that group. I kind of head that group up. I'm part of that group. You came from that group, so you were an application engineer when you first started at Promess. Yeah. We did all the service and support, that type of thing. So what does that really mean to you guys? That means we're going to continue to work with you, the end user, or you as the integrator to basically get that system up and running quickly and efficiently. So how do we do that?
Yeah, so we have a large group of applications engineers here, like John had said, here in Brighton, Michigan, but we also have on-site engineers in over 35 different countries to keep in mind. One of the things that we do offer that is different is that we have the on-call system, which is where you have support available to you 24/7, 365. So I know that's not necessarily always in the integration, but sometimes it is. You can always get a hold of one of the engineers. And maybe if this machine is being built at an integrator, that means that we're going to come onto your site and we're going to help you integrate it. But not only that, we've already done most of the programming in step number 2, the process development. So there's very little integration that's involved. We've already written the program. We've already done a majority of the engineering outside of a few tweaks here and there.
So the PDC developments is why that step 2 is important and crucial. We're able to import the programs, right? Just like you said.
Yeah.
And that speeds things up tremendously. Also, that just reduces the time on the integrator's floor, that type of thing. And it really reduces the amount of time it takes to get to production. Ultimately, you don't want that sitting on the floor. You need it to make parts and start getting your return on investment from that standpoint. So one other quick note about the setup and support. This is also the point where John, as the technical sales engineer, is going to more or less work with me, and we're going to assign an application engineer to this particular application, project, program, whatever it is, and they're going to stick with that throughout this whole process. And that's typically how we try to do that. So you're going to have full access to that engineer. He's going to be visiting the site of where it's being built at. He's going to interface with you for whatever needs you basically have. So that's step 4.
Yeah, so recapping number 4, whether this machine's going to your floor or a machine builder first, we're going to be there to help integrate that. And majority of all the work has already been done if we took advantage of the Process Development Center. Moving on to number 5, lifetime success.
Yeah, so lifetime success, this is from here on out. So let's just say the piece of equipment, the system is integrated, it's in an assembly line, for example. Now it's running production. This is where we also kind of separate ourselves from everybody else in the sense that we don't just ignore you at this point and move on to the next project. We're here for the lifetime of this project, this system. We created a partnership with you going through this whole process, and we continue it through the whole process. So as John had mentioned earlier, that may be 24/7 support. What does that look like? If you have problems and things like that, that means you have access to an application engineer 24/7. We both came from that. I'm still part of it. We have a on-call system that basically we assign an engineer to weekly, and he's responsible for getting back to customer emergencies, things like that, both during the hours of our normal operation where you can just call us, or you can leave a message and then we get back to you within 15 minutes after hours, and that's globally worldwide. So that could be the middle of the night, that could be Christmas Eve, that could be whatever scenario you run into where you need Promess support. And that's a big part of that lifetime success.
And that comes with the Promess.
That's all part of what you're purchasing when you buy a system from us. Additional to that, we also keep a very detailed Promess database of your particular backups and things like that. And that goes a long ways to understanding if you have changes. Let's take an example. Your process has been running for a couple of years now. Somebody goes in there, an operator goes in there and starts making changes, and it changes the process some and you're failing parts. So now the parts are failing. You call Promess. We go to our database, we can get you back to a level of where we know it's going to run correctly, and we can move on from there. So that basically is that 24/7 support. But seeming how we have that big database, we're able to do that relatively quickly.
Right.
So a lot of times this can be handled virtually or through phone support within that call, that type of thing. So it's that partnership for life. Additional to that also, and one of the maybe unintended things that a lot of people don't think about is when you purchase a Promess system, it's a very robust system. And it's easy for me to say that, but everything we design into that system is designed to run in production.
Yeah.
So to
what
run
that generally means is that equates to life expectancies, typically 15 to 20 years. And if you're working in the automotive sector, which isn't all that we do work in several different sectors, but a typical automotive program will be 6 to 10 years. With a system that's going to last 15 to 20, you can usually get 2, maybe 3 programs out of one press. And that's not uncommon. We do that all the time where people will reuse presses for multiple programs.
Yeah. So basically, to recap that, basically it's a partnership for life. You're getting the 24/7 support. That's globally. The system's robust. Possibly you can reuse it for other applications, things like that, as that particular program dies or ends its life cycle. Additionally, let's make a quick note that part of that lifetime success too is as we come up with new software versions and things like that, or maybe there's a feature we've added that you want, we generally offer free software upgrades. When you purchase a system, the software comes with it, and we offer that as a service as well. So partnership for life and a lifetime success is our step 5. So that's basically the 5 steps. If you want to recap all that.
Yeah, so kind of concluding everything and bringing it back as to how to be successful from prototype to production is when you start in prototype, there's a lot of unanswered questions that you have. And before you get to production, you want to have those questions answered and have the right answers. Following a step process like this with some of these bullet points that we segmented allow you to have the lowest risk possible solution. And that's really where we're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. It's all making the risk low for you and success at the end, because it works both ways. Well, we want you to be successful because we want you to buy more Promess equipment. And if it's not successful, that won't happen. So we will guide you through this whole process. So step 1, the initial discussion. Step 2 is basically the process development. That's the heart and soul of everything. Step 3, build and deliver, utilizing some of the things we've learned over the years in our agile manufacturing process. Step 4 is that setup and support. That's part of the deal. You get all that application experience. We have 15 application engineers locally here at our headquarters that have probably over 100 years of combined experience with all kinds of, not just the detail of our products and our systems, but also just hands-on experience with all kinds of applications ranging from automotive, life sciences, things like that. And then taking that to step 5, the lifetime success of it, making sure that that through the life cycle of your product, that our system is performing up to the levels that you expect it to do.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So that wraps up today's webinar. I think now we want to move into a question and answer portion. If you have any questions, please write that in the chat now, and we will try to answer as many as we can. All right, so the first question that we have, what do you need to know about my part before I send it to your lab? So generally, when we talk about the Process Development Center, what I like to do is I like to get some maybe prints or pictures of your parts that you plan on sending in for testing. Then I'll set up a virtual meeting for us to talk about expectations. What are the criteria that we want to look for? What are you expecting out of this this testing or feasibility study that we're going to do? And then I just need to know dimensions, right? I need to know which station we'll probably be using, make sure that's available and set up for your time.
Yeah, so we're pretty creative here at Promess. We're not necessarily tool builders, things like that, but we have a lot of different blocks and different types of things we can use to help do that. One thing we do suggest that is if you have it, any type of tooling or fixturing that may be specific to your particular part. That's kind of some, we can generally come up with our own ideas and things like that to do that, but the more you have, the more helpful that'll be, the easier it'll be from our side to be able to get those parts pressed together and get you the valuable data that you need. So the next question is there any obligations to use the Promess Development Center? There's absolutely no obligation to use that Promess Development Center. You don't have to use that. I understand sometimes prototyping, you don't have parts available, things like that, but I really would encourage you to come up and use it if possible to be able to do that. Additionally, also, at this point, you're not obligated to purchase a system or anything like it. It's totally free to use it. If you want to just understand something about your part, and you have no intention of using a Promess product, we're still here to help. Maybe in the future there's an opportunity or something like that, but that development center is for you guys to use and to learn more about your process and how our systems can work with that.
Right. Moving on to the next question, what is the typical timeline for this process? So it's kind of hard to answer, but we can try to answer as best as we can. So the initial discussion's pretty simple, probably a day or two. The process development, once we get parts to our facility, we can turn them around in a couple days. We always recommend having you present during the part testing that we're going to be doing, because I think it makes the experience better. But if we need to, we can do it virtually if necessary. And then the build and deliver, like we had mentioned, our lead times are not a problem right now. So it's whatever your lead time requirement is, really. And the setup support is infinite, right? It's a long time. It's a long time, usually 15 to 20 years. For that lifetime success.
Yeah, going back to the process development, utilizing that, generally we get parts tested in one day.
Yeah.
We get the parts in there. We have one of our application engineers that's kind of dedicated to managing that side of it. And we're pretty quick on that. You get us the parts, we can generally get you something back within the day a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So it can be a pretty quick process. I know in some cases we're generally try not to be the holdup in the whole process.
Right.
It doesn't look like there's any more questions, so I appreciate the attendance. We look forward to everybody at our next webinar, which I don't know what our next webinar is, but
I don't.
We've been putting webinars out about every month, correct? We'll just stay tuned for the next one. It'll be a surprise to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.